So I never attached my tie rod ends back to the steering arms since I did the front end, and now I've got the idler arm down so I could move the steering linkage forward and out of the way so I could take the oil pan down. So the only thing holding the steering linkage in the car right now is the pitman arm. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the steering linkage by taking the pitman arm off the steering box. Really should use a puller for that. Check the threads. Make sure I didn't mess them up. Shouldn't have done it like that, really. Okay, so here's the steering linkage out, and I'm going to get it cleaned up now and take a few notes and take it apart. Here's the steering linkage as it comes out of the car. This is looking down on it, of course, with the idler arm on the right and the pitman arm on the left. So I've got new tie rod ends, and I'll have to get the front end aligned, of course. But when I put this back together as a starting point, I want to reassemble the tie rod ends close to where they are when they came off the car. And I've got about 5/16, 3/8 of an inch of thread showing there, and I've got about 1/4 of an inch of thread showing there. And on the passenger side, got about 3/4 of an inch here, and about an inch right there. These plates are dust covers. They slide, let the tie rod move around, and the larger dust covers go under the tie rods. And these springs are conical in shape, with the smaller diameter against the tie rod and the larger diameter against the centerlink dust cover. And the pitman arm and the idler arm have the smaller dust cover with the tab on it, and the tab faces outwards on both the pitman arm side and the idler arm side. They also have the same conical shaped spring with the larger diameter of the spring against the centerlink. A little trivia: in 1978, Cadillac recalled their 1959 and 1960 model year cars for faulty pitman arms, and the faulty pitman arm had the number 1035 on it, same as this one, and the replacement number was 1038, but this is off my 55, and 55 was not included in the recall. So I'm going to start taking this thing apart, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove both the grease fittings. There's a possibility that the grease fitting extends down into the tube very slightly, and although the pieces aren't a very tight fit, there's a possibility that it could interfere with the ability to slide the pieces out. So you got the idler arm, you got the idler arm bushing, and the idler arm bracket. And the bracket, or bushing and bracket, have a left-hand thread. And when you install the bracket into the bushing, you tighten it down until it locks. And then you back it off a minimum of a half a turn, and then continue in the same direction until it rotates around to line up with the frame, which is right here. And the two bolts, of course, fasten it to the frame. And the bushing, the threads act like a worm gear to raise or lower this end of the center link. Both sides of the center link, the pitman arm and the idler arm side, need to be the same distance from the frame, and you get that by adjusting the idler arm side. When you need to raise or lower it, you disconnect it from the frame and you rotate the idler arm, and each 360 degrees rotates, lifts up or down about 3/32 of an inch. So I'm going to continue taking this thing apart. Pull the cotter pin out. Remove the adjustment cap. So this is the idler arm side, and it's got the same components as the pitman arm side, but the order of assembly is a little bit different, and I'll show you that. So this right here is one side of the two-piece ball socket. It's got this hole in the middle that allows grease to go through. So once you pull that half out, the idler arm will just come right out. And here's that dust cover, the small dust cover with the tab, and the conical shaped spring. And then the next thing out is the other side of the ball socket. And next out is the spring. And the spring stop. And remember, the large diameter of the spring stop faces in on the idler arm side. So the next piece to come out is a spacer, and I made this coat hanger with a T-handle and a little hook on the end, and I orient the hook to be sort of parallel with the T-handle, so I kind of know the position of the hook. And the spacer has, it's like a triangular three-sided spacer, and it's got grease ports in all three sides, just right about in the center. And the idea is to try to hook this into the grease port to pull the spacer out. You can't really go in all the way past the spacer and hook the far end of the spacer because there's an end cover on it. I'll show you in a minute. And it's just takes a little time. Got to kind of fish around for that grease port. Oops. There's the grease port. That's what I was trying to hook into. And you can see it's three-sided with a port right about in the center of all three sides. Okay, so once these pieces are all out, there's no more pressure on the two-piece ball socket holding the tie rod in. So I can just pull the tie rod back and forth to spread the two-piece ball socket apart and pull it right out. And then again, here's your bigger dust cover and the conical shaped spring. So I cut the hook off, so I got the straight shot in, and the idea is to go through the spacer end cap and through the 1/2 of the ball socket, and I'm putting the coat hanger right through the grease port, and this also takes a minute. I'm holding the ball socket with my left hand, keep it from moving. Alright, so I've got it through. And there's what it looks like coming through. And then I'm going to just reach inside and pull this up. And then I'm going to put my hook back in it so that now I can pull the end cap, end cover, and the 1/2 of the ball socket out. And you have to, as you're pulling out, just tap it and rotate the T-handle, so like you're going 180 degrees, so that you're tapping it kind of even on both sides, because if you don't, the pieces will get a little crooked and they'll bind up. And the end cover for the spacer is kind of delicate. You can mess it up when you're trying to get it out. It's kind of hard to see. Okay, so here is the end cover for the spacer right here, and see how it's stuck to the ball socket with that grease that's acting like glue. And then there's the outer part of the ball socket. And I'll clean these up and give you a better look at this stuff in a minute. So I'll take a small pick and I'll use the grease port in the ball socket and pull it into the elongated opening. And right here, that's the stop disc that rests against these indents that keeps the assembly in place. And the stop disc can actually be pulled out of this hole right here. So that's the stop disc or plate. So now with the ball socket here, I'm gonna cut the hook off this T-handle and move these pieces out of the way. And I'll go up inside and try to hit the grease port. So I've put it through the grease port in the ball socket, and now I'll reach back in here and put the hook back in place. And again, you got to kind of rotate the T-handle 180 degrees and pull the ball socket out without getting it crooked and bound up. Alright. Actually, that hook's way too big. That sort of caused a problem. Didn't want to come out that easy. And so that's it for the idler arm side, passenger side. So now I'll get the pitman arm side. Okay, so the pitman arm side is pretty much a repeat of the idler arm side, but you do have to pay attention to the order of assembly because it's a little bit different. Take the cotter pin out, and I'm just using an impact wrench to crack loose the adjusting plug on the end. And I've also soaked this with penetrating oil. Again, your end plug. So if you remember on the idler arm side, when you pull the end plug out, the first thing you came to was the ball socket. But on the pitman arm side, the first thing you come to is the spring and the spring stop. And yeah, so that spring's broken. Spring actually came out in 2 halves. And here is the spring stop. So you see the spring stop on this side, the large diameter faces outward. So that's interesting that this spring is broken. And the next thing out is the outer half of the 2-piece ball socket. And now, with the pressure off the ball socket, I'll be able to just move the pitman arm back and forth and pull it right out of the center link. And there's your small dust cover with the tab and the conical shaped spring. And the next thing out is the other side of the ball socket. Alright. Next out is the spacer. Now this spacer is shorter than the one on the passenger side because this dimension here is shorter. And so again, I'm going to use my coat hanger. And let's see, the spacer is about right in there. So the grease port's right about in the center. So that's where I want to try to find that grease port. Hooked right on it. Got lucky. Okay, so with the components out and the pressure off the ball socket, I can just move the tie rod back and forth to spread apart the ball socket. Oop. And take it out. And again, I cut the hook off the coat hanger and I'll run it up in here and go through the spacer cover and the first half of the ball socket, go right through the grease port. There's the coat hanger. I'll just reach right inside and pull it out so I can get to it. And this time I'm not going to put such a big hook in it because last time that hook was sort of made it difficult. So I'm just going to put a small hook in it. Let's see if that'll work. Just slowly pull in the inner or the outer ball socket and spacer cover out. And again, rotating the T-handle. All right, I've got it down to the first opening here. Rotating the T-handle to keep it from coming out crooked and binding up. Okay, so there it is. The spacer cover and the ball socket half. Set these aside. All right, so I've got the other half of the ball socket in there. And the stop plate, or stop disc, stop plate actually. And the stop plate again can come out this elongated hole. So on this one, instead of cutting the hook off, let me see if I can just push the ball socket through Here it is, it came all the way down. See, it's real easy to get it in here crooked, and it binds up real easy. Also gets hung on these threads right here from the adjustment plug. Got to kind of come straight out with it, but anyway, there it is. So that's that for the pitman arm side. So now I'll clean this stuff up and lay everything out so you can see it, get an idea of the order of reassembly and the difference between the driver's side and the passenger side. Okay, so here's everything laid out the way it goes into the assembly of the centerlink. You got the tie rod, the spring, and the large dust cover, the grease fitting. Here you got the stop plate that goes up against these 3 indents in the centerlink tube that hold all the pieces in place. You got the 2-piece ball socket that holds the tie rod. You got this end cover for the spacer, and then the spacer itself. And then you've got the pitman arm, the spring, and the small dust cover with the tab on it that goes outwards. And you've got the ball socket for the pitman arm, the spring stop, the adjusting end plug, and the cotter pin. On the 1954 model year, there are 2 springs and 2 spring stops. There's another one on the other side of the ball socket. And the difference between the driver's side and the passenger side is the arrangement of these components right here. This ball socket, the spring, and the spring stop. And on the driver's side, the spring stop is resting against the adjusting end plug. And you see here on the passenger side, the ball socket rests against the end plug, and the spring stop are on the inside of the ball socket. And the spring stop rests against the spacer, and then after that you've got the same end cover for the spacer, another ball socket for the tie rod, and your stop plate that goes against the indents. That's it for now.